This is the first ever episode of this podcast. And in this podcast, I'm going to talk about all sorts of things to do with weight loss, muscle gain, getting in great shape, and my own personal journey with fitness too. So this episode, I thought I'd start with one of the most common mistakes I see when it comes to weight loss, and that is being thrown off by the scales. So most people have a patchy, we'll say, relationship with the scales, if we're being polite. And a lot of the time that is what throws them off course. And I have seen this through every single year I've coached, and I've seen it with so many clients when they walk in the door, that the relationship with the scales is really, really poor, that they maybe are a bit stressed about them or prone to getting really frustrated if they fluctuate. And actually, getting on top of this, understanding how to interpret what the scales are actually telling you in a slightly more scientific manner makes things much, much easier. So rather than weigh yourself perhaps once a month or once a fortnight or even once a week, what makes a ton of sense is to be really, really systematic with your weighing. So every single day when you get out of bed, you go to the toilet and then you weigh yourself. The same spot on the floor, you don't move the scales, because if your floor is even a little bit softer one side and a little bit harder the other, you will see a little bit of fluctuation in weight. If you weigh yourself at vastly different times, I don't mean 10, 15 minutes earlier or later, but if you're weighing yourself in the afternoon after you've actually eaten or drank something in the morning even, it's going to throw off your weighing completely. And the amount of times I've come across this where someone is having a glass of water and they're like, oh yeah, my weight spiked up yesterday. It's like, yeah, you just drank 300 mils. That's 0.3 kilos up. That's quite significant. So it's really, really important. We're very systematic. So weighing yourself every single morning, straight after you've been to the toilet, same spot on the floor, wearing the same clothes, or indeed no clothes at all. That's really, really important. We want to be really, really consistent with it. Something that is not useful at all is to weigh yourself later in the day or to weigh yourself multiple times a day. I've definitely come across people doing this where they're like, oh yeah, but in the afternoon I weighed a lot more. And it's like, well, of course you do. You've just gone and eaten your lunch. And depending on how big your lunch is that day, it could completely throw it. So these are common issues that come up. And the reason they matter so much is because it doesn't give you a clear picture of your progress, right? If you are weighing yourself erratically, or you're doing it after you've had breakfast one morning, before breakfast the next, it's really redundant. It doesn't help you at all. And actually, the advice I always give is, if you're looking to weigh yourself daily, and we're going to talk about why exactly we do that in a second, if you're weighing yourself daily and you just forget one morning and you have a glass of water, you have your breakfast, it's better to just not weigh yourself at all at that point and then weigh yourself the next day. And then what we want to do with these weigh-ins, you might think, well, why not just do it weekly, right? Why not just get the trend from that? Well, the problem with that is that most of us are going to take an approach of having average calories, right? We're going to look to hit a calorie target, and across the course of the week, we're going to have like a sort of average for that. So I might sit at 2,300 calories in a diet, or maybe a little bit less, depending on how aggressively I'm kind of wanting to lose weight. Now, what I'm likely to do is I'm probably likely to stick to those calories pretty closely or just under on the kind of weekdays, right? So I might say to myself, I'm going to bank some calories Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to have some spare calories on Saturday because I'm going for a meal out or going for a couple of drinks. So it makes a ton of sense for me to do that. It allows me to hit the average across the week, and I'm still going to make the same amount of progress, and it works quite well to give me some flexibility. But there's a problem. If I was to weigh myself on Sunday morning and I go out for dinner on Saturday night and I've had a couple of drinks and a larger meal, it's very likely that I'm going to weigh a little bit more than I did the rest of the week on average, right? Because on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, my calories were a bit lower, and indeed my weigh-in's probably going to be a bit lower because of that. Certainly the next day it will be. So the problem here is, if you just pick up one particular time, you're really prone to being impacted by certain fluctuations. And a great example of this is where someone will do a weigh-in on a Friday and it's all going swimmingly until they go out for a meal on a Thursday night, and then they get absolutely hacked off with the fact that they've seen quite a big spike one particular Friday and their diet's then in the bin afterwards. That's pointless. That's not helpful at all. So shifting towards weighing yourself every single day and then taking the average of your weight, so looking at what that is divided by 7, and then comparing it to the following week is definitely the way to go, because it gives you a clear trend. And this is exactly what I do with our Sorted in 6 clients, with my one-to-one clients, is we look at average weight and it gives us the overall trend, because your weight will fluctuate. And one of the great things about checking on your weight every single day is you'll see how much certain things impact it. If you have a salty meal, for example, quite often your weight's going to spike quite a bit the next day. Even if you eat a bit later, it's not having any impact on your overall fat loss at all. But if I eat at 7 p.m. tonight and then I eat at 9 p.m. the following night, which is definitely past my bedtime, then of course I'm going to weigh a little bit more, right? That makes perfect sense that I would weigh slightly more the next morning, because you've had less time to digest it, you've not moved afterwards, etc., etc. You're not going to weigh exactly the same if your meal times move, if you have slightly saltier food, if you have a meal that could be really, really healthy and a good amount of calories, but is chock full of veg. That could be a lot of extra weight in your digestive tract, right? You have a ton of fiber, so it takes a little while for that to kind of break down, and it's higher in food volume, it weighs slightly more. All of these things can have an impact on what the scales say the next day. Yet, if you weigh yourself every single day and average it out, all of a sudden those things don't matter that much, because you're going to get this clear downward trend. So I'm a big advocate of weighing yourself every single day and taking the trend, so the kind of weekly average, and using that. Now, if you are tracking on a spreadsheet and you're kind of organized, we use like Google Sheet with our one-to-one clients, and that allows me to kind of see a clear trend. But if you're not doing that right now, you're just tracking your calories on a standard tracking app, what can be really useful if you have an iPhone is the Happy Scale app, which shows you what the moving average is, and it also shows you the weight trends. And that can be really useful, and it reduces down the stress because you can see what the trend is doing over time. And if that trend is obviously down the way, if it's a negative trend and you're dropping weight and it's an average of 0.5 kilos, let's say, and you know that you're having the odd fluctuation, like on a Monday you tend to weigh a little bit more, by the end of the week you weigh a little bit less. That's quite a common trend, sort of like people tend to find that Monday's a higher weigh-in and Friday's a bit lower, because the weekdays tend to be a little bit easier to stick to calories. All these things are really, really useful. So I'd recommend grabbing that app as well. It's free and it's dead simple to use. It is just like a sort of graph, if you like, but it's a nice way of displaying it. So that's why I'm such a big advocate of these daily weigh-ins, rather than using like the odd weekly weigh-in where you then get a little bit unlucky, you happen to stumble across a bit of a weight spike and you feel completely deflated and you just want to chuck your diet in the bin. So that's one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of it. The other one is to do with your relationship with the scales as well, is that if you step on the scales every day, it tends to take away some of the stress and pressure. I do find with a lot of clients who've previously been at kind of like slimming groups or have even just done weekly weigh-ins themselves, they put a lot of pressure around it, and it also sometimes encourages quite unhealthy behaviors like not eating the night before or not hydrating the day before as well, so you can weigh a little bit less, all these kind of things. And it creates this kind of pressure around it, and you step on the scales with great expectation, and if that number goes up, you are so frustrated that you just want to bin off your diet. And typically people do this on like a Friday morning, so they end up completely deflated before the weekend. They go overboard for a few days, and of course the weight shoots up even further because they're well off the calories if they're tracking at all at that point. And is that you start to put less pressure on it, so you have less of an emotional reaction. It becomes a little bit boring almost. It becomes a little bit less interesting, because a bit like brushing your teeth, well, hopefully like brushing your teeth, you're doing it every single day. It becomes really repetitive. And in a way that's good. We don't want weight loss to constantly be this roller coaster of emotion or be really exciting. Yes, we want to lose weight. Yes, we want to feel good about it. But actually being really up or down all the time about whether your weight's trending down or has jumped up a little bit is quite unhelpful. We need to be able to stick to our calories regardless of what the scales say. We need to keep doing what we're doing, whether on a particular day it's dropped or it's jumped up a little bit. So it's really useful in that sense too, is it does take away a little bit of the emotion and the excitement, and it becomes something that's just very normal and very routine, which is exactly what we want. So that's some thoughts behind why I much prefer daily weigh-ins, a little bit about why that can make your relationship with the scales better, and it allows you to track your progress more accurately and see the trends. and it will really, really help you manage some of the emotions broadly around it, because weight loss is tricky, right? It's often, even if you are doing really well and dropping a good amount of weight, it takes time. Very rarely does a diet take 2, 3, 4 weeks. It's often months rather than weeks. So we have to be able to stick at this for the long term. So having a bit of a more balanced, structured, slightly more relaxed approach in some regards, where you just feel like it's very normal to weigh yourself and there's not all this emotion, is only going to make it much easier for you. Hopefully that was helpful, and thank you for listening to the first ever podcast. Speak soon.